Hello you lovely lot and welcome to a new video. My name is Katie and I thought we could take a closer look at the Viviva Metallic watercolour set. If you're new here, I definitely recommend after this video you check out the haul video and have a little look at the other goodies I bought on that haul. But in the meantime, kick back, relax and enjoy this swatching and creating with these Viviva Metallic watercolours. What a mouthful. As you can see, the set itself is tiny. It literally just fits in the palm of my hands. And the 15 pans that are in there are inlaid into a corkboard palette, I guess. And I suppose they're quite ideal for travelling with, or if you're a little bit short on space, I guess they're ideal because they'll just hide away into nothing. I also appreciate the environmentally friendly packaging there, although saying that as well, there's a bit of a downside. Once you've used all of those paints up, it might be a little bit tricky to refill them. But anyway, I will talk about the palette a little bit further on in the video. Let's talk about the colours. So when I swatch out metallics, I like to work on two papers. I like to use a black watercolour paper as well as a white one. This enables me to, I guess, see how well these stand out on a darker surface, whether they're relatively opaque or not, and how they would apply over darker colours. It's just a little insight into that. And of course, using it on the white paper allows me to take a look at what it's going to look like, whether it's more colour or more sparkle. Now, the colours we have in here are metallic light green, yellow topaz, orange sapphire, pink pearl. I'm going to try and pronounce it this time. It's udilite. We have amethyst, aquamarine, sapphire, green sapphire, rust, brown quartz, metallic grey, silver, gold and pearl black. And all of those colours stood out wonderfully on the black paper there, apart from the pearl black, but you know what, I'm kind of okay with that. There was a bit of a shimmer to it, and that's all I can ask for really, especially when it is labelled as being a black paint. Upon using them on a regular white piece of watercolour paper, it seems very different indeed. They actually seem to behave a little bit more like a regular watercolour, and when I say that, I mean it kind of spreads the overall appearance of the pigment. It just seems more like a watercolour, and that's comparing it to other metallic paints I've used, which I do intend to revisit at some point throughout the year. But I thought I'd just start off with my latest ones because, you know, new shiny things. I think though, judging by how they behave on white paper, I reckon you could probably get away with doing a full metallic picture. However, that's not really something I kind of like to do, just because the sparkliness tends to overwhelm. However, again, referring back to how these colours spread, you could do it. I reckon you could do it. It's kind of hard to describe how these compare with other metallics that I've used. Obviously, they do have a good sparkle to them, but on a lighter surface, that sparkle becomes a little bit more subtle. For me, where I tend to find these types of paints tend to shine, see what I did there, I find they work much better on a darker background, whether it's a black paper or a different coloured watercolour paper, or if you've put some normal watercolours down beforehand. But that's just how I roll. One of the notable things in comparison to swatching them on the black paper is that white, well, the silver doesn't stand out, but that black one does, so I guess it swings and roundabouts depending on which surface you choose to use. I thought that a great vessel to take these paints out for a spin on would be a peacock, as they have such a lovely lustrous set of feathers, and I thought having a bird with really deep coloured plumage would work amazingly to get the most out of these paints. Now, as you can see on screen, I am using the Gansai Tambi watercolours because I think they're just quite a lot of fun to use. I don't want to go overboard with details and too many layers there, and I thought these would just be great to add that splash of colour for the background. I mixed a bit of black paint with that sap green colour in there to create this sort of deep inky background. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. And then after that, I very, very loosely painted over the top using the blue and the black, and it's very loose. I wanted it to be. Again, I'm still on a little personal mission to try and loosen up my style, and I thought this would be a good start. Whilst that second layer was still wet, I just added some of the blue, and it was neat to the wet paint. Again, just keeping it relatively loose, but just enough to make sure there was a difference, and it just stood out enough. Now, I really wanted the white bits of this peacock to stand out, and that silver worked perfectly. Even though it's not a true black background I'm working over the top, you can see straight away they stand out, and I really appreciate that about these paints. Don't get me wrong, I love most of the other metallic watercolours I've got, and they have their own unique properties. However, when I want to add a light area, I really want it to stand out, especially on this picture here. And I was really impressed. I wasn't really sure how it would work over, I guess, the mid-tone that I'd put there, but it stood out straight away. And not only from a sparkly point of view, but from, I guess, an opacity point of view. I guess if I was to describe these paints, I'd say they were like a metallic gouache. They really do hold a good opacity, and it was quite refreshing to see actually that they didn't contain any clay filler or anything. They really did pack in those mica particles, assuming they used mica. I'm pretty sure they did. The metallic light green colour stood out beautifully, and when it came to adding some of the plumage to the peacock, that blue colour just stood out like a dream, and it was just the perfect blue. Now, rather than filling in the whole area just with the blue and having it as a solid, I thought actually adding those line details to represent those finer feathers would work great. It added just enough hue on there for it to stand out, but again, because of those line details, it adds a little bit of interest when the light catches it in the right way. The Udea and the amethyst colours were great just for adding, I guess, a little bit of deeper tones in there and a little bit of shadow on the plumage, as well as adding, I guess, just a little bit more iridescence than what you would actually see on a peacock's body. Now, I know a lot of you do ask about the brushes I use, and this, I must admit, I do have quite a few rigger brushes, but this has been a good go-to for quite a few years now, and I believe it is a Royal & Langnickel rigger brush. They're relatively inexpensive, and they do last quite a good while. They are the clear-handled ones as well, just for reference. I guess you can't quite see it on this video. Oh no, there it is. For the black detailing on, I guess, is it the wing of the peacock or part of its body? I'm never really sure, it gets a bit of a jumble with peacock feathers. But for the black part of its plumage, that pearl black worked beautifully. It stood out just enough, but it didn't compete too much with the line work. However, if you're a regular viewer, we all know that I'm going to go over everything again with pen. But I was really impressed by how well that black stood out, and I didn't use a very strong concentration of it. I'd say I'd probably used something in between a mass tone and a watered down version. I guess it was just somewhere in between. It was time to now add the branches to this, well, bigger branch that this peacock's sitting on, and those gold and earthy tones that were in the set were just absolutely perfect. Even when it came to layering the brown quartz over that gold colour, I thought we might have a few problems there, but it stood out enough on its own for me to do that, so I was quite happy with it. I was not complaining. I also decided that this would be a good opportunity to actually solidly block out an area. Again, not using the mass tone for this, just somewhere in between, just so those textures underneath still peeped through, but obviously adding enough sparkle on there for it to stand out proved to be a really good decision there. To create a little bit of depth, I dare say I even watered down the areas that I'd consider in shadow, just so that reflected through when the light caught it. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a peacock without that beautiful tail plumage there, and this was the time to start adding those details in. I used the green sapphire to begin with, just I guess as a bit of a guideline for me as to where I was going to put everything else. I must admit, out of all of the colours, I'd say that was probably the most subtle one, not only for its actual pigmentation, but for the sparkle itself. However, that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. Sometimes you just want it to be very subtle, and that just fit the bill. It can't be like a disco ball all the time. As you can see, I'm referring back to the blue as well as that amethyst colour, and I also add in that Udilite. Oh, really, I'm struggling to pronounce that one. I also start adding in a little bit of aquamarine, just again for those lighter tones on the feathers, and I just keep layering everything up. Not to the point where it completely covers everything, but again, just so it catches the light in a more interesting manner. These metallics are perfect for just adding pigment and depth, I guess, as well as adding that sparkle. The only issues I had with this palette was that the colours contaminated easily. The actual pans themselves are raised above the surface of the palette, and that did cause contamination a few times with the water rolling off into the other colours. But if you can put that aside, I'd say these are a brilliant set of metallics to play with. They cost me £19.80, which I think's pretty reasonable as well for the amount of different colours we get there, and for the really good quality I think they are too. I like the fact that they're just not silver or gold mica with dye over the top, and they are actual colours, and I always appreciate that. I want my blue to look blue rather than a tinted silver. And as we pan over the picture, you'll be able to see just how beautifully these catch the light. It's not too over the top, but it definitely stands out enough. They work great on white, black, and I guess a mid-tone surface there. So yeah, they're very versatile and they're great. They're nice and portable, and I loved working with these. But of course, let me know down below what you think. I do hope you've enjoyed this little review here, and I hope it's given you some good hints and tips for using whatever metallics you like to use too. Anyway, you lovely lot, I want to say a massive thank you as always for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!